How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Now, the Springboks have done it. They beat Georgia 55-10. Pretty dominant performance, as we would expect from the Springboks. But there's a lot to break down and a couple bits that I'm not happy with. So please like, subscribe. It really does help the channel grow. And let's get into it. So, first of all, I was not happy with the Springboks in the first half. We ended up seeing a much more dominant Springboks in the second half, but the first half, and especially the beginning of the second half, far too many mistakes, far too many penalties being conceded. Things were not flowing as well. I mean, the Springboks did manage to notch up over 20 points over the Georgians, but we saw from the beginning Georgians getting early on the scoreboard and started to put a lot of pressure on the Springboks. Now, when we look at unnecessary mistakes, penalties conceded, handling errors, the Georgians are not the All Blacks. They're not the Irish. They're not the French or the English. They are not going to be given the time and space like they were up against Georgia. Everybody was dead at the end of the game, and we ended up seeing quite a few tries from the Springboks late on, which ultimately ended up, taking the scoreboard to 55. But through the game, there were far too many mistakes happening far too often, and it was up against Georgia. Now, South Africa are lucky that it was up against Georgia, right? I do feel that Georgia are a very underrated squad, right? They actually got a lot of talent and a lot of up and coming talent, but obviously they're not there yet. They're not at that level that's truly going to be causing South Africa's problems. But this opened up a lot of issues and a lot of errors, unnecessary mistakes under the high ball, mistakes on the offloads, which it seems like they ended up fixing at the end of the game. But yeah, it was just, and it was consistent. Normally somewhere where you see the Springboks quite good when it comes down to stealing the ball at lineouts and things like that. The Georgians were dominating when it comes to the lineouts. So, like I say, it was a good performance, but there were a lot of little bits that I wasn't happy with. I find it's the fine details, and it's these fine details that are ultimately going to affect the Springboks when they go up against the All Blacks, when they go up against France, New Zealand, uh, England, Scotland, Ireland. The teams that they are going to be focusing on these fine points, and it's these fine points that are going to allow them to break away and cause the Springboks a lot of problems and end up putting them on the back foot, right? Now, in saying that, we had some spectacular performances today. Pieter Sifte was from another planet, as he normally is. He was just dominant. He was scary at all points. He was that workhorse, making big tackles. He was carrying so hard. I think Springboks actually ended up getting over 500 meters, right? Over 500 meters post contact. I think in the Wallabies Lions game, they had barely cracked like 150 post contact meters. The Springboks got over 500, right? Shows how dominant they were when it came to that attacking force, when it came down to, really running with the ball. We saw that with Damien Dialende. We saw that with Edwil van der Merwe. Edwil van der Merwe. I I actually saw a comment, which I'd love to find it again, because I actually did end up replying to him, because um, I'm a firm believer on everything that I've seen from Edward van der Merwe. This guy is the next thing for the Springboks, and he's showing it. And they said, "Oh, but he's no Cheslin Colby, right? And he's not going to replace Cheslin Colby." I'm like, okay, look, just as when Brian Habana was coming to the back end of his career, we needed a player, we needed a talisman on the wings, that's really going to light everything up, and we got Cheslin Colby, right? And Cheslin Colby is one of the greatest Springbok wings of all time. Well, just utility man. You can play him around the park. And Edwin van der Merwe, I feel that he has all the traits needed to be legendary. It obviously is going to come down to him, his work rate, how he eats, how he looks after his body, the time and effort that he puts into the game. But 5 tries, 3 starts for the Springboks. That is not special. I don't know what is. We also got to take in consideration quality of teams that were being played, the quality of try. His timing is just beautiful. Timing is on point, right? His speed, the way he's able to find those inside channels, the way he's able to find those little intricate gaps and then work his way out, phenomenal. If he continues on like this, in the same way that Cheslin Kolbe is no copy of Brian Habana, Edward van der Merwe is no copy of any necessary winger. He's going to bring something completely different to the Springboks, which is needed. It's a new player, it's a completely different style, right? But just as effective. And if he continues scoring like this, my word, what a player we're going to have on our hands. Because then we still got to think, we got Kurtley Arendse, who he had a phenomenal game as well, right? And he's going back to the Bulls for the next season. We still got Cheslin Kolbe, who's playing phenomenal rugby. Yes, he's in his 30s, but tell me, guys, are we short of quality on the wings? And then we have Ethan Hooker as well in the sidelines. We got Kanan Moody, who had a brilliant game today as well. I really enjoyed Kanan Moody's performance. Yes, he had his ups and downs, but I think he put in a pretty solid performance. He can play in that outside center. Plus, he can also play at that number 11 as well, just as effective. And we saw he's pretty good on on that touchline. So Edward van der Merwe, he is phenomenal. I feel he is one for the future. I think he's going places. He is really, really going places. The Lions have a lot of talent. For Morne van den Berg, they got Edward van der Merwe, Nhlaba Kanye. They have got really, really good talent on their books. Hopefully, they're going to do a little bit better in the URC next year. But I digress. Players like Peter Seftotoy, players like your Damien Dialende. I mean, we had a good performance. We saw a lot of players working their backsides off, willing to die for the shirt, which is essentially one of the requirements that Rassie does put down in order to play for the Springboks. It's just I felt there were too many individual errors, which will not be forgiven up against top elite level talent, which we are going to be facing later on. If the Springboks play like they did today up against the All Blacks at Eden Park, we're going to get thrashed. I think the Springboks are going to be playing France as well, and I think they are going to be playing Ireland later on in the year. I think in the Autumn Nations. If they are putting in performances like this, we are in some serious, serious problems because the Springboks got the upper hand. The Georgians got tired. We ended up finding a lot of space, which is why we saw such a flurry of tries come this late second half. We started to see Archie Snyman really start to dominate, start to power through, and then he got into the swing of things. He started to feel good. He was doing those little layoffs, which ended up. I think he ended up getting 2 tries. Building up 2 tries from that. But again, it is up against a subpar team that is still developing, right? They were tired. They didn't have the energy to maintain and to compete. And this is why we started to see a dominant Springbok side back end of the game. Winners find a way to win, and they did it. They played beautiful, beautiful rugby. But you watch the game, you started to see a lot of the Georgian players not running as much, not filling in those gaps as much. And we started to see a lot more open space. Yes, the Springboks did also find a lot of open space, like Andre Pollard finding those little gaps in between that defensive line. I think he did it. I think it might have been in the build-up to Edward van der Merwe's second try, where I think he ended up finding a little pop into open space, managed to get a run on, ended up getting tackled, but then the recycling from there. But like I say, the Georgian side let South Africa off with a lot. Other teams are not going to do that. So, albeit it was a stellar performance in terms of the scoreline, a lot needs to be worked on. And I'm no coach, but there were points that got me thinking, if that happened up against New Zealand, that would be a try. If that happened up against Ireland, we'd be in lots of problems because the lineouts that were being dominated, the lineouts that were being won by the Georgians, when it comes down to Ireland, they're going to be kicking corner. They're going to be going in for that lineout into the maul, and they got a lot of heavy players, much stronger than the Georgians and much more experienced than the Georgians, and they'll eventually end up scoring a try. So there's a lot that needs to be worked on, but this is very promising for the Springboks. A lot of talent on show. Always lovely to see Faf de Klerk coming in. Love to see him play. He had a pretty good game while he was on the pitch, and ultimately, back end of the game, we look at it in hindsight. You think, oh yeah, they played so amazing. Look at this 55-10 scoreline. But then you start to see, okay, for the first good portion of the first half, they were in a little bit of problems. Georgia were causing them hassle. And the second part of the first half, yes, the Springboks managed to get in through tries, but again, mistakes, right? And a lot of these mistakes, I wouldn't even say were made because Georgia were dominating. South Africa were making their own mistakes and feeling the pressure from it, right? But the Georgians weren't able to capitalize on it the way an All Black side would, right? They weren't able to capitalize on it like an island squad that's going to be on your backside when they're going to have players like Bundy Aki just constantly in your face, right? So well done. Amazing performance from the Springboks, 55-10. I was so happy when I saw that. And it was brilliant, fast playing rugby second half. But Rassie is going to look at this, as Rassie will do, and he's gonna break it down, right? And he's going to try and find all the little errors, all the little fixes, what can be done, how can we improve, because the tests are only going to be more difficult. And the Springboks need to be a well-oiled engine, running perfectly, pistons firing exactly as it needs to, for us to get a brilliant, brilliant performance, especially if we want to get a win out of the All Blacks at Eden Park. So, guys, let me know what your thoughts are. What do you think of the game? Maybe you think I'm talking absolute BS, and you thought the Springboks were brilliant. Don't get me wrong, I thought they were brilliant, but looking at it individually, there were a lot of individual mistakes, a lot of unnecessary mistakes that were made that need sorting out. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, please like, subscribe. It really does help the channel grow, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye.